23-year-old me thought I was the coolest kid around when I first picked up this Lotus Esprit. That soon tumbled into a V8 car, and then later on into the current car that I own, which is this yellow V8 Esprit. And as if that weren't enough torture for me, I soon found myself back on Facebook looking for more cars, of course, and I stumbled across the absolute perfect Lotus Esprit. Well, perfect for me, that is, because in the eyes of most, this would be an absolute pile of garbage. And next thing I knew, I was in my car, headed down to North Carolina for a 1,500-mile round trip to go get this thing. Got the car on the trailer, so here she is. A 1977 Lotus Esprit. They only made 700 something of these, and you can see it is rough. There is a lot of work that needs to be done to this thing, but it is pure. It starts, and the best part, take a look at this interior. It has the tartan. Now we've got a long drive home through the night, through some pretty terrible weather, so let's hit the road and get this thing back home. And if you've been following along for a little while, you'll know that I've made a couple videos about this car already. The main purpose of this one is basically to bunch together every bit of footage I have on this car and give you a front to back look at the full restoration. We're going to throw in a lot of new footage too, so this will be a completely new video for you guys. And the first thing we've got to do here is get some better light in here. Once I close this garage door, it's pretty bad. Can't really see much of what's going on, but we have one outlet right here and a Home Depot down the street, so we're going to try to rig something together so I can get a little bit better of an idea of what we're doing here. Voila! $150 in lights later and a little space heater, and we're ready to get going on this thing. So from my research on these, they made about 700 of them worldwide. So this is like an incredibly rare car. They made a lot more of the later models, but this first generation S1 is just a really special car. They weigh almost nothing, and yeah, they have this little 2-liter 4-cylinder in here. It barely makes any power, but you really don't need that power when you are so light, and that's kind of just the motto of this car. On closer inspection of this paint, it's just really bad. You can feel pretty much everything with your fingertips. It's worn through in some pretty odd patterns here. Like up here, we're down to complete fiberglass. Like this is just a little bit more than I thought it was going to need, but we're here to learn and we're going to get this thing perfect. Trust me. We have lights that don't work in the front, some lights that don't work in the back. I'm not an electrician. I hate working with electrics, but I should be able to figure that out. Down here, I was looking at the tires and they're dated 2020, so this car must have been running and driving at some point in the recent history. One thing that makes me also think that is the cleanliness of the motor. I mean, it's not anything crazy, it's not the cleanest motor I've ever seen, but there are new gaskets on there, metal's not potted or anything like that. One of the really cool things about these, if I can get the camera down in there, is you notice that right there? That is a brake rotor, and it's a couple feet from the wheel. Yeah, this has inboard brakes, so to kind of help keep the weight in and low, that was a really cool system. Down underneath, look at that right there. That is some new suspension, and there is no rust or corrosion or anything. The owner said that it was off the chassis, like the body was lifted off to do a restoration 6 or 7 years ago, but I had no proof besides just his word. Usually you can't really trust that. The timing belt up here doesn't look too bad. I'm going to check the date code on that. That'll give me a little bit more of an idea of when this work was done and all that, but I tend to kind of believe him now that I'm looking at the car. It's not a blue belt, which I would eventually like to change. They're just the preferred belt to put on any of these Lotuses. They last a long time. And it's an exposed belt, which is kind of odd, so I'd prefer to have something that's a little bit tougher out there. One pretty wild thing about these cars is there is plywood everywhere. It's in like an H-frame chassis, so it sticks out here, goes in really tight down the middle, and then sticks back out up at the front wheels. So it's basically just a giant H, and then the body sat on top of it, and this is all fiberglass. But back here, this whole area is all plywood. Down here, plywood. This stuff that sits up above here is kind of like a beauty thing to sit above the battery and stuff. That's plywood. If you look back behind here, behind this license plate cover, There's some plywood. There's tons of plywood on the interior, but I don't really see that as a bad thing. It's gonna be really cheap when I need to replace those because they're all warped. Just go to the hardware store, buy a $20 sheet of plywood, and bam, what would it cost a few $100s on another car? It can be done really easy and cheap. Unfortunately, on my drive back, I had to back this car up onto the trailer. There's a giant lip at the front to kind of secure the wheel, and the front lip was never fitting over top of that. So when driving down the freeway, wind was kind of hitting the car this way, and I'm not super familiar with these cars. On the 4-cylinders and V8s, there's usually a water strip or weather stripping that goes around here. There is a little bit on the corners here, but I'm not sure if there's supposed to be another one, so let me know if you know otherwise. But water was just puking into this right here, and I had my spare headliner that the owner gave me, and then all my boxes of parts over there in here, so that is all soaked. I have the carpet out here to try to dry, but I'm gonna really need to figure that out. Coming around this way though, I didn't notice really much water in the interior. I mean, there's maybe, oh, that floor mat's not as good as I was hoping it was. There's a little bit of water up there, but that's probably not too big of a deal. All this is dry, and I'm not sure what's going on here, but there are like literally house speakers stuck up under the seats. If you look through out here, oh, that's cool. There's usually, like in the V8s, there's a speaker here, and then there'd be a speaker here, and then one on the dash. I don't see any speakers inside this car, so I'm wondering if under seat was the original intended spot for a speaker, but that's just an aftermarket one. I'm not sure about the radio either. That thing looks old, but it also lights up kind of LED-like. Unfortunately, with this cluster, all the gauges work, but I really couldn't figure out the lighting situation. The lights don't seem to come on here. But other than that, the interior is, in my opinion, this is the coolest interior that you can get like on any car. This is what I was searching for. Orange carpet with green, like suede, I guess, and then you have the plaid stripes throughout. I think these were supposed to be green. I don't know if this is just sun fading that made them look blue, but I think that's kind of a cool look. Now, I'm not too versed in interior, and given that this looks pretty good, it's really, really expensive to have somebody redo this interior. But what I'm hoping is that mine is in salvageable condition. This right here is supposed to be the original color, and over here it still has a little bit of the color, but it's very faded. I thought it was going to be brittle, but this is really actually pretty supple, and I don't really have any concerns about this ripping or wearing, minus maybe that right there. But if you know anything about interior, let me know. I'm wondering if I can dye this instead of having to reupholster the whole thing. I know that'd be a little bit more risky, but the only alternative is reupholstering it, and maybe if I dye it and it doesn't work, then I can just move on to that instead. Inside these is extremely cramped. My V8 I fit into pretty well. I'm a little over 6 foot, maybe 6'1", but in this car, look at my head. It's touching the ceiling, and then the pedal box is very, very tight. If I get my light over here, you can see pressing my foot's all the way up against the edge, pressing the gas, I'm hitting the brake pedal as well. So you'll either have to wear really thin shoes or kind of tilt your foot to the side here. It's not made for big people. Colin Chapman wasn't big, so that's kind of how he made his cars as well. But I fit just well enough to be able to use it. Over here, the only issue with the interior, besides a little bit of pulling on both of the seats, the headliner not being in, is this rip right here. I really don't know what to do with that. It's really unfortunate. That might be the deciding factor of the interior. When you open this glove box, it doesn't stick like it should, but down in here is a array of fuses, and I'm pretty sure that these cars did not come with prong fuses. They came with like the little tube ones, and I'm kind of concerned that somebody was messing around with the electrics, because I really, really don't want to have to deal with that. Over here, amongst these boxes of parts, I'm not sure where it is. There was another switch. There we go. There's a fuse box. I'm thinking this is the original one. I'm still waiting on my book to be able to really dive into it, But if this is original, this is what I want to put back into it, and I'm kind of afraid that whoever messed with this before might have been the culprit for this wiring not working. But we get a lot of extra goodies. I'm not sure why there's a spare air box, spare like shifter surround. These air cleaners don't look like they'd fit on the carbs, so I'm not sure why they're here. The carbs are over here. There's an extra set of them. And they're dual carbs, so it's like kind of 4 carb system. Those air cleaners would not fit on here, but I'm assuming these aren't too expensive. I'm assuming the owner at one point just ended up replacing them rather than rebuilding them. But not a whole lot of extra stuff. But the crazy thing about these is parts for these cars are super cheap, like way more than you would ever think. A lot of part sharing was going on with these, so that's just the beauty of an old kind of parts bin car like this. Now there are things that aren't shared that are one-off, like trim like a pier, which I will need to be repurchasing, and this kind of trim, windshield trim, all that kind of stuff. Mainly cosmetics things, but it's really not too expensive either. Trim pieces like this I looked up online, I think that was 30 bucks. The gas cap, these aren't the proper ones, those were 30 something as well. Then if we come out here, the windshield surround was like 75. I mean, that's really not too bad for a car that they only made 700 something of. And that's one of the big things that led me to buy this car. Besides like the purity, the first year design, all that kind of stuff, there I think was like 760 or 780 made worldwide. I guarantee maybe a third or a fourth of that made it to the United States. And then of those, there's probably a pretty small number that had this tartan interior. If you have any information on that, just let me know, because I really would like to know how rare this thing is. For a little while, until I can find somebody to do the paint, I think this kind of actually looks cool as like kind of a rat roddy look, but that's not going to last. I'll probably put a handful of miles on like this just because I'm really excited to drive the car. So my plan to begin with is to kind of just look over this. I'm going to check the oil and see if the leak is coming from just a loose bolt over here. I think I've isolated the spot. If I run my hand up under this side of the cam cover and pull it back, yeah, there's the oil. It's leaking on, like this is directly over the exhaust manifold, so that's kind of unfortunate. So I don't want that to be leaking while I'm driving it at all. There's another piece of plywood right there, but this is pretty crazy access compared to the V8. The V8s are so cramped. So I'm gonna get a 10 millimeter, tighten that down, and we'll hope that that does the job there. I'm not gonna get a torque wrench out or anything. I just wanna make sure that they're not like super loose. That one's pretty tight. That one's okay. I also notice a little bit of wetness around here. Yeah, look at that. Down around here. Looks a little shiny, doesn't it? So maybe it's coming from this top cam cover. Oh yeah, look at that. Maybe it's coming from this top cam cover and running down. Just like most old cars, there's not many bolts holding this valve cover on. There's 6 on each side, which doesn't really seem like a lot to me. The only thing I can think of is potentially this is over tightened, or this oil cap right here is not holding. This also has what I'm assuming is a smog pump down here or something. I mean, this literally looks like a blow-off valve down here, doesn't it? Like got the diaphragm that pushes up and pushes the air out, but I'm assuming that's like a smog pump or something. Not sure if I'm gonna pull that off or not. If I want to try to keep everything original, I'll keep it, but it just it looks like overcomplication to me. But let's pull this cap off. That's not good. That's probably just from, that doesn't look like it's head gasket related. That's probably just moisture since the car's sat for so long. I guess it could be a PCV issue or something that's pushing oil out the top of this. Let's get our dipstick out and see what we're looking at. Now, I know almost nothing about these NA cars, so bear with me as I learn. And if I do something wrong and you know otherwise, please point it out to me, because I want this to be right. That doesn't look original. That looks like a plumbing piece right there. That's fun. Let's go over here and check the coolant. Oh, that's tight. There is coolant in there, and it looks pretty clean. No residue on top of this, so I would assume that the oil and coolant are staying separated as of right now. These cars really aren't known for head gasket issues. I did have to do a head gasket in my 93.5 SE, but that's because my timing belt snapped. With that car, bought it in a similar state, minus the paint was pretty good on that car. And as I got it home, I pulled it off the trailer. And as I was pulling it off the trailer, the timing belt snapped. So before I even got to experience anything with these Lotuses, I was doing a timing belt, and I think I was only 19 at the time. So I'm really surprised that went over well, but it's not that hard of a job. Everything's right here and easy to access. Let's get this cap back on. And we will find our dipstick. I'm sure it's sitting right in front of my face and I just can't see it. There it is. Oh boy, that's stuck in there. What a wild looking dipstick. It is solid. This is thick metal. I'm used to those flimsy ones you get in modern cars now. Where the hell is the hole for this? What a weird placement. Looking down there, it looks like the starter's brand new. That's what you got to do. You got to look through the side window to be able to fish it down in there. That looks pretty good. It is still amber, so I doubt there's been any miles put on this, and it is just below the minimum level. So that tells me I'm safe to kind of start it and move it around here and there. So what I've gained from my little search so far is that the underside and all the suspension and all the hard parts look pretty good. All these lines are looking nice. I need to do a little bit of electrical work, a lot of cleaning on the interior. Let me know what you guys think about the dyeing of the interior, and then I just really need to start stripping outside parts off of this and sanding, because this paint, yeah, unfortunately it just needs to go. Alright, if you were ever looking to buy one of these, I'm going to give you some quick motivation not to really quick. So I'm trying to replace the brake light switch, and it is right. Let's see if we can get to it. There. And let me show you the position you have to get in to be able to replace this. Here goes nothing. Oh, I've got a cramp. That was an absolute nightmare to get out. This is a $3 switch, I guess, after looking it up online. I was really hoping this is going to be the issue. But if we take a look at this multimeter, I'm going to stick these in each side of the switch. If I could get that to stay, and watch when I hit the switch. It's working. So my issue lies elsewhere. I'm not sure where else it would be. This is a really simplistic system. I can't even find a fuse or a relay for them. I think it's literally just wired directly to this. So I guess I'm going to trace the wires all the way back. Maybe I'll complete the connection to make the wire hot, and then kind of probe around and see where I can find power back there, or if I can find power. So fun. we have brakes. God, that was a nightmare. Good thing is, this is really simplistic to take apart. You just have a couple screws holding each one of these panels on. You see the corners right there. And then this just pops right out. It's put right into this just very thin, easy to push in and out area here. And then down in here, it just gets clamped on with these. Super simple design. These just push up against here, and then you bolt the like brake light to it. But I'm not sure what the issue was. I just kept running continuity tests and then checking the brake light switch, and then I hardwired the switch together so it was always putting out power. And then when I did that and started messing around with these grounds back here, it popped on. So not sure what the issue was, but I fixed it, so I'm not going to ask any more questions. And then the next thing on our electrical issues is going to be trying to fix these front headlights and the fog lights, and those are kind of hidden by this front panel, so I'm just going to pull this off, get myself a little bit better access to it. And up under here you can see the absolute mess of wires that this thing has. None of it really looks original, and frankly it's going to be pretty hard to figure out. Now these are supposed to flip up, and there's one motor that controls both of them, and this little micro switch is what kind of tells it that the hood's down, because this is actually an interference hood. And here is our motor. It's a pretty big girthy thing, and nothing is really working on it. There's a couple micro switches up on the actual motor too, so I'm gonna have to do a little bit of diving into that and figure out why these things will not come up. I can't really tell if it's just a weak motor or if there's something binding it or what's going on. And one thing that seems to be kind of a theme on this car is just how thin this fiberglass is. I mean, you press down anywhere and it just buckles. And unfortunately I noticed right here that there is a little bit of a crack, and you can see how much that's wobbling there. I think we're going to have to do a good bit of fiberglass repair to get this thing holding. That kind of sucks, but I've got to get used to it because there's a lot of fiberglass on this car. One thing I have gathered about these cars is that owners are extremely helpful. I mean, there's only a handful of them out there given how rare these cars are, but with the couple interactions I've had already, people have been helping me out like crazy. So what I think I'm going to be doing is just to test the fact that the motor works. There's two micro switches on it, and then like a cam lobe to kind of, I'm assuming, tell its position. And then over here, there's a black and a yellow wire running to the motor. Those are the power wires. So apparently if I hook that up to a 12 volt, then the motor will just continuously turn. So we're going to do that to check and see if this is an issue with the motor or the wiring leading up to the motor, which will tell me a lot. But that's easier said than done. Up under there, there's almost no room at all, and the bolt is really, really tight up against the pod, so I kind of fashioned this with some duct tape. We're going to hope that it holds once I pull it out. Alright, I think it's safe to say I figured this out. I'm going to do a little test here and see if we go around in a circle. So that works. That's all that motor does. What I found out was happening is, this is great Lotus engineering here. On the headlight motors themselves and in this front pod area, you'll notice a lot of these bolts are ground down really far just to make clearance. I think it makes sense just to make this arm a little bit further protruding, but I guess that's not my call. But this bolt was coming in contact with all three of these mounting bolts around the edges as it was going around binding, and then that's why it was shutting off. So I just took a bar and did a small bend right there to get it to clear, and now I just have to figure out how to line everything back up. I took a bunch of pictures, so as long as it was in the right spot to begin with before I took it off, it should go back together and hopefully get some functional headlights out of it. We're here on day 2. I got a little tired last night, but I got this whole front trunk kind of cleaned up. You'll notice I repainted a little bit. We'll probably have to do that later again, but I thought I'd just go for it now. And last night we did end up putting the headlight motor back in, and you press the button and they kind of go up, but they do need like a little bit of help, but I think that's just due to a low battery. They go down fine though. And for some reason, a car from 1977 has LED headlights in it, which looks completely wrong. So I've got some original ones we're going to put back in it for like an actual like amber look. Let's take a look at the before and what it's supposed to look like. We are now up underneath the car, and I wanted to show you a couple odd things here. So the first one would be that the muffler doesn't have like a hanger or anything. It is literally just bolted to the back of the transmission with some hose clamp looking things, but that's from the factory, so we're just going to clean up that and reuse it. Under here, you'll see traditional shift linkage here, but then for the front to back part of the linkage, there's a straight up bar. And it's pinched in, kind of has some linkage going up front, but I've never seen such a thick rod used for linkage on gear shifters. Join me sitting here in the engine compartment of the Esprit. Typically for us Esprit owners, this is where you'll be found if you want to do any work on your engine. But while I was under there showing you the linkage that you can see from right here, I noticed an unfortunate puddle on the ground that looked to be oil. Now I know the valve covers are leaking a little back here, but if I reach my hand up under this portion, we also get a little bit of oil. So what I think is happening is it is leaking out of the front of the valve cover as well as the rear. Let me get the camera positioned properly. I think it's dripping down onto this bar right here. And then there we go. We can see a lot down there on the chassis. It's dripping from that bar down to there and then onto the ground. So this valve cover gasket is not proper. This is not the right option for this car. Apparently there's cork and then a different material, but these get over tightened a lot and you can see it's squished out right here. So I ordered a new one just in case. We're going to swap that and torque it to the proper specs, and that should alleviate all the leaks. While up here though, you can see we have the Stromberg carburetors on the car. There is a lot of pointless lines on this, and these are pretty restrictive. So when I first got the car, I found a box in the trunk that had these in it. So these are the Euro carbs, and I think the goal will be to get these on the car eventually. They're pretty complete, although they're pretty nasty on the outside. I just need the choke arm that goes from here to here, the new throttle cable. But back under these, if I can get it off without breaking anything, they're pretty clean. So I think these are going to be usable. I ordered a rebuild kit and then those couple other extra parts we need. But this should open up the car's breathing a lot. This is the air filters that come with the Strombergs. You can see that opening is very, very small. And that's for both carbs. And you put it up next to these, you get double the airflow. So these are the ultimate answer. I just don't know how soon I'll be putting these on. That looks all right. So we had to drain the oil to alleviate all the pooled oil in this because this engine kind of sits sideways and it just sits there in the rocker covers. So we're going to pull these guys off, and I have some proper OEM gaskets that we're going to throw on there. But the smog pump is kind of in my way and I have no need for it. So we're just going to kind of toss that out the door while we're doing this valve cover job. I'm working with the cam cover gaskets now to try to get this all sealed up. Design's a little funky, being that this engine is tilted so far on its side and the cam covers are like kind of a circular design. If I hold this camera properly, that's flat, so the cam cover literally sits like sideways, so oil pools up underneath down here and then it just drips down. So it's also kind of odd fitting the gasket on these because this is like so circular. I mean, it's literally like that shape right there. So a lot of people say to put a small bit of silicone on it, but like when you stick it on there, it's hard to form it to this and hold it in place to get the bead on the other side and then put the cap down. So I'm going to try a couple different solutions and see what I can do. I know that these gaskets work a lot better than these rubber ones here, and you can actually apply a little bit of silicone to these where you can't with the rubber. So I'm gonna do that. Oil change, got the new plugs in there, got a thermostat, to put in here as well because the car's not getting fully up to temperature. So I think I've figured out one of the reasons these cars are known for their oil leaks. Apart from the head sitting just completely sideways, if you look at the casting up here, can you see how kind of inconsistent and pot-marked this is? It almost looks like someone ran like a brush over top of it. It's the same up here too. I'm assuming it's just the quality of the day. I've seen a lot of old cars and I've seen that happen quite a bit, but I think that in combination with having this completely tilted sideways probably does it in. And from this point of view, you can kind of see how difficult it is to get this thing on there. The gasket itself wants to kind of pinch out as you try to roll this through that little section that you have to put it on, but after 700 tries we ended up getting it on, and I think this leak is going to be no more. We have to put all these brackets back on because they are part of the system that kind of holds this smog setup up over here, and while we're going to delete the pump, I'm going to be leaving this spot right here just because if it fails to come off, we break a bolt off in the head and then I'm kind of screwed. I had a lot of people contact me with specific information about this car. People have been really helpful so far, but it was cool to get some actual pictures of this thing. Apparently it was owned by a guy in Oregon before it was sold to the guy that I bought it from. The guy that lived in Oregon apparently pulled the body off of the chassis and redid pretty much everything there was mechanical to do. And then he got the body back on and he died. So that's unfortunate, but he was planning on doing the rest, interior and paint. He just never got to it. So we're going to complete the last step of that process for him. We're going to get this car on the road. We're going to get it painted. We're going to get it not to showroom condition, but to really good condition. That'll be kind of cool to pay homage to him. All right, now that we have taillights, brake lights, headlights, all the stuff that needs to be legal to drive the car, we're going to get it on the road and see what else is wrong with it. Hopefully not a whole lot. Judging by the state of everything, I think we're going to be safe and everything else will just be cosmetic, but I guess we'll just have to test it out. All right, let's see what we get. Well, we get a windshield wiper that's on, and it needs to go off. Come on. Okay, let's see what we get. Gotta make sure all my mirrors are right since it's the first time in this. Oh my god, it's a little jerky. Everybody's walking their dogs today because it's nice out, so I gotta watch out. Alright, so I can't really judge yet because the choke is still on and it's cold outside. So I'm gonna get this warmed up a little bit and we'll see what it drives like. But first impressions, the steering is remarkably tight. The clutch could probably use a little bit of work. I think I might need a new slave. Good thing that's a $50 universal part. Alright, we go into second. Get the choke down. Let's pray for third. Okay, we're in third. And let's go to fourth. And we don't have enough speed for fifth, so we'll have to wait for that. I'm going to get the choke a little bit back on. Yeah, it seems to be tight. The oil pressure looks like it's working. Battery voltage working. Fuel gauge is working. A little rattly, but that's fine. Alright, needed a little bit of gas to stay running at the stop. Air-fuel ratio looks okay. Alright, let's get going. We can actually gain a little bit of speed on this road. I think I'm about to have to take my shoes off at this next stop. I cannot reach the pedals. Let's see if I can do that while driving. Okay. I can actually press the gas without pressing the brakes now. 4th gear. And 5th gear. No grinding. Okay. Transmission's good. My linkage adjustment worked. I can notice that this thing is a little bit bumpier than I expected, even with those big sidewall tires. I think that's just kind of the nature of the beast. But yeah, the steering feels amazing. All the gears go. I haven't really given it full throttle yet, but we'll save that for another day. I just wanted to make sure everything drove. Kind of bogs down a little bit at stop, and I did notice 3rd's not the easiest gear to get into, but I don't know if it's fully warm yet, so we'll keep warming it up and we'll see where that goes. I didn't pick the best time to come out here and test drive. It's a really nice day for midwinter, and everybody's just getting off work, so I'm just kind of staying around my block. Oh yeah, it sounds amazing. I still think I'm going to take that cat off, but that's going to make for a pretty loud car without that thing on there. Gauges, check out. The only thing I can think of is maybe a little bit of a linkage adjustment, and I guess the brakes probably just need a little bit of bedding after sitting for a while, and I think the tires might be slightly flat spotted, but I'm going to put some miles on it, maybe 10 or 20, see if any of those things get a little bit better. But the next thing we're going to be doing is stripping it for paint. I got some good news. A friend of a friend that does fiberglass work said that he's able to get it in about 4 weeks. So I just made a huge order from SJ, getting pretty much everything I'll need after that. And I think the next round we'll be kind of taking everything apart, sanding it down, getting it ready for paint. So today we're basically just going to be starting from ground zero. We've got a lot of body work to do. I'm relatively familiar with body work, but nothing crazy in my past with fiberglass cars. So it just looks pretty straightforward. It's a main body, and then you got all the parts riveted down to it. So there's a lot of rivets we're gonna have to drill out, pop those off. And then the first real thing I need to tackle is the car is a federal spec car, and I want it to be a Euro car. They're much better looking, obviously, as most cars are. With the Euro spec versus the federal spec, but the rear bumper is going to be the hardest part. It has 6 mounting points for the federal, and the Euro is just a couple bolts that run through the back of the fiberglass. So we're going to have to fill all those and re-drill. That's probably the biggest obstacle besides just the vast amount of sanding that we have to do. I just pulled the rear bumper off, and one of the first things we're going to do is adjust this bracket and redo it. Now, with the Euro bumper, the exhaust is going to sit at a different spot, so we have to chop this off and kind of re-drill these holes. And here is what it looks like with the bracket off. You can see it just literally bolts into the transmission, and those bolts actually hold the cover on, so it's a pretty wild setup. And we're going to give the exhaust a quick spray of paint before we put this back on and get to the rest. For the rear bumper, we need to fill all 6 of these holes. The Eurospec bumper actually has 2 bolts that run through the body, and that's all that holds it on, and the Federal Spec bumper has 6. And we don't want any open holes in the car, so we're going to fill these up and then drill new holes later on. So that did not go entirely according to plan, but you live and you learn. So what I ended up doing is I tried to fill it with this fiberglass filler, like this fiberglass reinforced filler, and the holes are just too large for that. So then what I ended up doing is grabbing actual fiberglass and then pushing it into the hole and spreading it out on the backside, and then filling it with resin and then putting resin on the backside. That way I can form an anchor on the backside of it so it doesn't pop back out over time. And then it's a little bit messy through this backside right here, but what I'm going to do after it dries is sand it down, create like a little divot into it, and then fill it with the fiberglass filler, because it will be much smaller of an amount that I'll be needing, and then giving a final second sand over top of that. I think that's going to be the most structural way to do this for me.
We're just going to give this a quick sand just to get it a little bit leveled down. We're going to deal with actual leveling later on, but we just want to get this filled and move on to the next thing, which is just stripping the car. This is going to get a full repaint inside the trunk, door jambs, under the hood, all that kind of stuff, so pretty much everything has to come off. We're going to take all the interior out of the car as well. Now this is pretty easy to do. There's a couple screws that hold everything together. I mean, it's an old car, it's just basically thrown in there. So we'll get the door cards out, then do the seats next, and we're going to leave the dash in the center console because that's honestly too much work to take it out for how much benefit I get out of that.
Okay, somebody please tell me this is normal. So I was on SJ looking at the cost of these like little rubber gaskets, and they were pretty astronomical, and I couldn't figure out why, but I think I know now. So this looks like a side marker that's probably bolted on the other side, right? It is. And then for some reason it's hardwired to the wiring harness, so you can't pull it out. I'm gonna have to like snip it or something, but this right here is not attached to anything. There's a lip right here on this rubber piece, and this pulls off, and it's held in by this ridge right here that just sits in this rubber gasket and kind of clings on. And then from there, these plastic pieces also just sit in this little rubber gasket. So basically this whole side marker is held on by this ridge inside this little rubber gasket. And then if we go look on the other side, this one has already been taken off, and then these little plastic bits just come right out. So this whole thing is literally just held together with friction from this rubber gasket. I don't understand. All right, it's time for another update. I can say I'm genuinely doing everything I can to not have to get to sanding this thing. Bodywork is my least favorite thing in the world, but we have most of this interior stripped out. When the car goes to paint, I just don't really want to mess with them getting any of the interior painted on or anything. So one of the things that was surprising me the most about inside of here is the seat mounts. Now, I know the car is very thin fiberglass and it's kind of spongy, but I was expecting some sort of metal reinforcement under here to get the seat held in. Obviously for safety reasons. The seat belt bolt is really nice and sturdy, but this is just so flimsy that even when I put my weight on it right here, I can feel it flexing, maybe this much. So with all four mounts, I guess it holds the seat well. You're not going to fall through it, but I genuinely am afraid to think of what would happen if somebody got in a crash with one of these cars. It's just, I mean, it's what you got to do to be lightweight, and I like it that way, but it's pretty shocking. And as of now, I pretty much have every trim piece or thing that needs to come off the car in order to paint it done. We have all the taillights out, we have the license plate surround out, we have all the waistline trim off the whole car, taped up on the wall right there so it doesn't lose its shape. Windows out, we have this guard out, we have this, I guess, beauty cap right here, I forget what they call it. And then the next thing I have to do is remove this trim piece. And you would think it'd be a simple thing. Now, I'm here to prove you wrong. There are rivets all the way down it. But one of the other things I was looking at is just, this is probably the thinnest fiberglass I've ever felt. I mean, it's genuinely less rigid than a piece of cardboard. I mean, I guess it does its job. Its only reason to be here is to hold the door card up, and this just to hold the, like the door lock mechanism. But I guess the theme of everything is just thin fiberglass, like genuinely shockingly thin fiberglass. All right, next up is the front splitter. So I really wanted to take this whole assembly off because it is attached to the radiator, but the guy who's painting the car said that it has to run and drive to be able to get it in and out of his shop. So I pulled this down, and pleasant surprise, the radiator looks literally brand new, fans look brand new, but I had to pull this section off because of this little chip. So on this splitter, it's supposed to come all the way out to here, and that was gone. So I had to pull this down. It was real sketchy because this is super thin and easy to crack, and it's bonded all the way around and down. And then, just like everything else in the car, a couple rivets here. So I popped those out. This is a replacement. Looks like it's got a little spider cracks here and there. This is the best we can get though, so this is going on. I had to notch a couple pieces here and here for the drill to sit in for these tabs, and then I've got to drill 2 holes, and then we're going to use just a couple dabs of panel bond and then put some new rivets on, suck this thing back up to the car. And I don't really care that the painter won't be able to get up under there. It's never going to be seen, it's going to be blocked. As long as he can get down to this portion right here, which this won't be blocking, I'm good to go. Got my panel bond here. This is left over from when I had an Alpha 4C last year and I did a bunch of body work on. This is some serious stuff. This is tougher than nails. It's also very expensive. So since if I ever have to take this back off again, I do not want to have to mess with that stuff. So we're just going to use kind of like little spot welds along it, maybe put 3 or 4, probably 4 or 5 bits on here. And one thing I just despise that I've had to do so much on this car is drilling out rivets. I hate doing it, but one thing I love doing is putting in rivets. So we get to do the fun part now that the hard part's done. Another update here. You'll notice that there is no window or window frame. I had to take that off in order to get this trim piece off. Tiny little piece causing that much pain in the ass. I'm grabbing the piece right now so I can kind of show you what's going on. So this is like the weather stripping seal bit, and there are like a little nuts here. There was one right there that I broke off because it was rusted. So I'm gonna have to buy a new one and one there. So let me get the direction right. This sits here and it kind of slides into those little slots there. But in order to get to that, the glass has to come out. In order for the glass to come out, the whole frame has to come out. So there's like nuts here, 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 and then one's buried way back in here, there, and then one right there behind the wire. And then you got your others there and there. So that was a pain in the ass to take out, but now we have the door stripped. I'm contemplating taking it off for the paint job, just so the painter can get in here. Not sure yet, I'll contact him and see what he wants, but we have a fully stripped car on this side. But the fun bit about doing that door is now I have to do it again over here. So here's a better look. Trim sandwiched against the window. The trim around has to come off to pull the window out. So got to undo all those bolts there, and they have shims in them as well, just like most things on these types of cars. Let's see if I can find one. There we go. So it's shimmed, so I have to remember and document how many and where they go and all that kind of stuff, and then mark all the spots with a marker. That way it will go back on the same way, and I can have peace of mind. And now it's time for my least favorite part about this whole project, the bodywork. I've already got a little bit done. I wanted to do some testing to figure out what I wanted to do before making any documentation of it, but you can see that I have a couple panels taken pretty much down, and then I have some that are still in their original state. So what I've been running into is this paint is really, really bad. Like, it's bad enough that you can catch an edge on a lot of this stuff where it's completely gone through. And then up here,
it's flaking, and there's cracks everywhere. If I can get this zoomed in a little bit further, let's find a good spot to demonstrate. So if we look here, see all these little cracks? That is all the way through the paint, through the primer, and almost to the fiberglass. And that is fortunately only present on anything that the sun was able to hit from the top. So all these panels, roof, the bonnet, the hood, and then like the fenders and right here in front of the window cards, those have all been damaged pretty bad. But if you go down here, this paint, I could literally polish out and it'd be presentable. So what I'm gonna do is this, everything on the top has to be sanded all the way down, almost to like right at the edge of the fiberglass without cutting through to it. And then down here, I really just have to scuff up and get prepared to be sprayed over. So unfortunately that leaves me with 60% of the car needing to be taken all the way down, and then the rest of it will be a little bit more smooth sailing. One thing I do need to figure out is there are a couple of portions in the car that are this bad. I'm not sure how this like wear spot is so isolated, but there's like 5 or 6 of those throughout the car. And looking up in here, you can see that the paint is gone, it's all cracked off, the primer is gone, and then this little spot right there is like the coat right over the fiberglass. So I basically have to sand everything down into this kind of coat right here without breaking through that onto the fiberglass. Up here, I've done a good amount of it. This is pretty much ready to go, although we have patches here. It's definitely smooth. But up here, we had another one of those spots where this was actually worn down. Like the paint started eating away at the fiberglass here. So you could see a lot of resin throughout this section. And I had to sand that down and then fill it and just keep doing that until I got it built up and nice and sturdy. I also put some more resin in those areas that needed it, but that was a pain. This was the worst spot on the whole car, so all I have to do is sand this little patch down and this up here, and then that whole section is good to go. Just have to cut down that side of the car and then the front. So most of you will know that bodywork on fiberglass cars is not the easiest thing in the world. I'm going to be very generous and light with this just to make sure I don't bite through too much of the paint past the point of no return and damage the fiberglass. So we're using a lot of hand sanding and light grit with my orbital, and it's going to take a lot of time, but that's just kind of the way I want to do it because I'm not super experienced with this kind of stuff. This process took me a few days of like 8 to 12 hour days, so it was quite a lot of work, but I wanted to get the car prepped for the painter so he didn't really have to do anything, and that way I knew it was up to my standards. And one thing I really didn't think about is just how much dust this creates, especially with a light, very thick painted car like this. So it was an absolute mess in my garage. I'm so happy things like Postmates exist, because I would not be going upstairs and cooking food looking like this. But we have a nice bench here. Look at that. Gourmet. I ate way more than I should. I'm feeling super sluggish right now, but we have to get this thing done today. It's Thursday, I work tomorrow, and then I'm out of town the next 2 days, and the car's going in for paint on Monday. So I've gotten most of it done. If we look through here, all this is good. So I basically just have this quarter in this door left. It's pretty late, but I think I'm gonna work well into the night tonight. Believe it or not, this is what the garage looks like after like probably 2 hours of cleaning. This thing is a absolute mess. I feel like I'm on the surface of Mars, but we are making some progress. I don't know how I'm going to get the dust out of all these things I have on the sides, but the car is done, so that's all I care about. I think I've done it just in the nick of time too. We have to get this on the trailer tomorrow to get paint. So you can see how much paint I actually had to take off this car. Pretty much everything from the waistline trim area down. It was unbelievably hard. I was genuinely surprised at how thick the paint was on this car. I mean, it was
thicker than most cars I think I've ever seen, which I didn't expect being on fiberglass, but we have it all cleaned up. We have one seat in there so the painter can move it around. I'm just going to take a good round of the car here. Everything has been blocked and leveled out, although you see high and low spots. I think it was just inconsistent to begin with. So we have all that. I think I'm going to be painting the window trims here by myself, so I have those over here in the corner. I'll take care of that while the car is off getting paint, but I think we're good to go.
I'm really thankful I found a great fiberglass guy because he found some crazy stress cracks that I completely missed. They were under the portion that I sanded, so I'm glad that he took it down a little bit further and went the extra mile to make sure this car was absolutely perfect before it went in for paint. And I asked him for a couple pictures of the process. He didn't really give me too much, but it's really cool to see the whole process of this. They are amazing at what they do. I don't know how anybody does paint, but this color looks absolutely perfect. Spot on to the factory color too, so we're in a really good place here. Seals on seals on seals. Carburetor rebuild stuff. Throttle cable, seals, wheel bearings. Somehow he got this done in under a week, so I'm more than excited. So the first thing we got to do is start throwing on our new trim and bumpers. I bought a brand new front and rear bumper because I wanted the Euro spec, like I was saying. They're just a lot more delicate and fit the car much better. And we threw on the waistline trim as well with this special adhesive Lotus provided.
Alright, everything's gone relatively smooth so far. The valance doesn't fit perfectly, but it's a handmade fiberglass reproduction part, so I didn't expect it to. It's going to sit a little bit too low. My only other option is to cut two pieces off and re-drill it. I don't think I'm going to do that right now, but the bumper only has one place it can sit because these have to come up and connect to the bottom of it. So I've mapped out my hole, and it's now time for the part I have been afraid of the most. So I had to relocate the screws for this because for some reason they came right here, when in the factory one there's a middle and then outside. So there's no way to get to where this was. So I had to drill two holes and kind of feed a nut up around back and relocate this, and then I've got my new spot for the hole right here. So I guess here goes. All right, let's make sure we're right where we wanted. That hurt. That really hurt. This is what caused me all my pain and heartache yesterday. I worked on this thing for about 15 or 16 hours, and just getting the door back together probably took at least 3 of it. So what my problem is this channel right here is very narrow, and the surround for the window has to go in here. It goes through, bolts on here, one here, one way down in there, and then a couple over here along the door. It's just kind of a pain to get everything lined up. There's no access. You also have to do all the wiring down here, which you have almost no room at all. But then you also have this trim up here that I got a new piece. We're going to put that on. You have to put probably 15 to 20 rivets to get that on there. So we're gonna hopefully have a little bit easier of a time on this side. Also have to get the door lock mechanism and all that kind of stuff lined up. So we're gonna get to that. Next will be the interior, as we only have a dash in right now. And then the rest of the stuff I have to do are just little bits and trim pieces and all that kind of stuff. So shooting for tonight. Here it is, last piece of the car. Figured this would be a good one to save for last, so I'm gonna go ahead and pop it into its home here. We have our little washers that go around back, or whatever you want to call these things, seals, and we're gonna be done.
Well, cosmetically, that is. Alright, first little drive out here, we're just going to kind of get into the throttle a little bit, and hopefully that will kind of tell me where some of my issues are stemming from. That lasted all of about 300 feet. And there is oil literally everywhere, and I have no idea what's going on. It's just pooled all over the engine. This is a massive leak. I've never seen anything like that. Let's take a walk. Kind of just want to see how long this actually lasted for. When I first noticed it, I was coming around this roundabout up here to the left, and the oil pressure just dropped to the floor. And I've spun some bearings before in my time, so I really wanted to minimize the risk of that happening, so I immediately cut it off as I was coming around this corner right here into the parking lot, and kind of just coasted into the space I'm at. Now, I'm only about a quarter mile from my house, so probably just gonna walk back home, grab at least 5 quarts of oil or so, and we'll try to put it back in the car, start it up just to see where it's coming out of and see how easy of a fix this could potentially be. It could just be a blown line or something, or I could have a hole in my block. So fill the oil back up. We're just going to crank it over to see if I can pinpoint this. Well, that doesn't require a lot of investigation. I think it's pretty obvious where that thing's coming from. Good God. So it looks like the oil pressure line blew off. It's not really running amazing. I mean, it's kind of dying, so I'm really hoping I didn't mess this engine up. We're going to try to get it back on the road since I'm building oil pressure now, just get it home and do a little further looking. Yeah, that didn't sound good. If I blew this engine up, I don't even know.
I think we might be all right. I scared the shit out of myself. Within maybe 20 seconds, I lost 4 quarts of oil. I don't know how that's possible out of such a tiny little hole. Oh my god. So I put these air cleaners on. I think I'm gonna put the original back on. They just didn't have the right seal for this PCV valve, or this PCV line right here. So I'm waiting for that to come in, and the original will go back on. I found out where the oil leak was though. I haven't done a ton of diving into this section since I just got the car running, but right here, that looks like a modified oil pressure switch. I'm pretty sure this is the factory one right here, and whoever has put an adapter on and run it over to this guy here. I could be wrong because this doesn't look too aftermarket here, but this line blew up here at the connection right there, and given this is like a 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch line, I didn't think too much oil would be able to escape. You'd be wrong. I think I lost probably 5 quarts, maybe 4, in a matter of 20 seconds before I was able to pull off the road. But thankfully, I think there was enough oil in the bottom that it was still lubricating the bottom of the motor, because it started up and ran just fine, and I have a good oil pressure again now that I filled it back up. So I think I'll need a little bit more time to figure out if I dodged a bullet there, but that was probably the scariest thing I've ever experienced in a car. I've spun a handful of bearings in my days, and I don't ever want to do it again.
It's me from the future. It took a few days to get a new braided line in, but that is installed, and that will never have to be an issue again on this car.
Somehow, UPS came on time for once, and I have my new Gates Blue Belt that's going to be going in here shortly. The one on here is a Gator back, which is a decent belt, but the date code reads 2013, so I don't really want to be driving much more with it like this. I also have been messing around with timing. This car is set at, I think it's roughly like 7 to 9 degrees right now, and it seems to be running well on that, but there is a really bad vibration under throttle, mainly in second gear. And I don't think it's any of the running gear, because I just replaced the wheel bearings on each side, the brake rotors all around, and I just got new tires mounted and balanced, and it's still there. I don't think there's any balance point on these short little drive shafts, so I'm pretty sure it's some sort of hesitation or miss due to these carburetors right here. Alright, first thing we're going to be hitting on this thing now that that whole oil disaster has been averted and the car thankfully runs, we are going to do the timing belt. I just peeked at the date code, and it's kind of terrifying to think that the date code is actually 12 years old. And I've had snap timing belts before, so not trying to deal with that again. So before we even start the car or run it or do any other timing or whatever, we're going to do that timing belt. Shouldn't be that hard on this car. I've done other 4-cylinders, the turbo models, which are actually a little bit more complex, so I'm expecting this to be a rather straightforward job to start off. I have the air filters off. Next thing that will happen is the alternator. Then after that, the crank pulley gets popped off. And then there is a water line right there that goes to the water pump. That will be pulled off after I drain the coolant out of the front of the radiator. Now I just got the coolant system figured out, so probably not the greatest time to be pulling the line off and having to redo it and re-burp it and all that kind of stuff, but I really don't want to be driving on a 10-year-old belt. So let's set the camera down, we're going to take that off and get to work.
And plugs will be next, so we can spin the engine freely and get it to TDC.
So I've only been at it for about 45 minutes and I'm already pretty far. I have the coolant drain, the water pump hose disconnected, this water hose disconnected, alternator's out, the crank pulley is out, and we are lined up TDC. You can see that right there. And this is cylinder 1, so we can see top dead center right there. So there is no way to really lock these cams. So I've heard a lot of people say they kind of just zip time in place. 5 or 6 of those should be strong enough to hold a cam if it's trying to spin. But after that, then literally the next thing I have to do is take this tensioner bolt and back it out, and the belt will come right off. So much easier than the V8 cars right there. I just did that one and a couple other V8s recently. These 4-cylinder cars are really easy. Funny story, my first Esprit I purchased when I was maybe 20 years old or so. Went and picked it up and it had sat for a while. So I was very new to the platform and didn't know what to expect. And backing it off of the trailer after I bought it, the timing belt snapped. So before I even got to drive an Esprit, I was doing a timing belt, pulling a head off, and fixing valves. So in the grand scheme of things, this doesn't seem that bad. I've done 100 timing belts in my time, and I don't know why this part always makes me so nervous. Every time. I quadruple checked everything. But tension's off. Time to slip her out. Well, tension's for the most part off. It's still got a little bit. There we go. All right. She's loose. I remember doing a lot of them from underneath on my SE, but this one is, from what I'm finding, a lot easier to do from the top side. Gotta get this around the water pump, and then the coolant hose for the water pump. Here it is. So let's look on here, see what we can find. Okay, so Goodyear, gator back. This is the number I was looking at right here. See if I can get that to focus in right there. It says 03/06/2013. So I'm assuming that's March 6, 2013. It's 2024 now, so that needs to be gone. And here we have the Gates Blue. I've had this on every single one of my Esprits. You put it on, you'll probably sell it before the belt is an issue. So that's going on. Pretty sure these are from a 300ZX. I could be wrong, but if you'll notice these teeth, they're not rounded, they're squared. So it's kind of an odd belt. Let's look at this old one. Man, this thing is in remarkably good shape for its age. I always hate when you pull something off because you're in fear of it snapping or whatever, or fear of it failing, and it is in literal perfect condition. But age said this one had to go. But if I go around, no cracks whatsoever, no issues. It's a pretty solid belt. Oh well. This belt's quite a bit stiffer. You should see the position I'm in right now. It's kind of humiliating. I call it the Lotus position. I think I'm gonna go get some clamps and just clamp this down. Make it a little bit easier. One of the crazy things about this engine is right here, most timing belts will at least do 90 degrees around the cam sprocket to hold it well. This right here is like 7 teeth. Like that's as much as what's holding it on. So, I mean, I'm sure they knew what they were doing, but that's just so odd to me that that's how that works. So as usual, everything was way more difficult than it should have been. That being said, this is a really easy timing belt. So I ended up just popping these windows out to have some better access and be able to get a vantage point down into here. But I have the cams marked up, yellow dot, and then for the distributor, let's see if I can find it. There we go. See the yellow dot there. And then back here, we are on TDC with this little marker. And then up front, we are also on TDC. So I've rotated this around a couple times and we're checking tension right now. And these are called to use a Burroughs gauge, which is kind of just like a two-prong thing with a like meter in the center to see how much flex the belt has. A lot of people use these Cricket gauges instead, and I have on these 4 cylinders as well. So after you rotate it around twice, get back to TDC without messing with like wiggling it or anything, so the belt's in full tension. Then you take this gauge and you set it dead in the center of the span right here, and you click down, push until you hear it click really slow. All right, and then you come over here and you try to figure out where that sits. So this one looks like it's right about 80. So I'm shooting for 83 to 85 on this gauge. And then down here, here's the spring tensioner. So basically, you just stick a screwdriver into this, and since it was 80 and we're shooting for the mid 80s, sorry, my light source needs to come back. There we go. Now we can see what we're doing. So you just get a flathead, stick it on here, and you will tighten this up a little bit. And then once you reach your desired tension, you lock it down with this nut. So I'm going to do maybe 1 turn, rotate the engine twice over, check it again. I think 1 turn after being so close is going to be our desired number. And then what I'm going to do is we'll lock the flywheel back here just using like a screwdriver or something, and we will tension up that harmonic balancer pulley. And then after that, it's just the alternator, the 2 belts, and then we have to hook the water pump back up and get some coolant in the car. And then it should be good to go. I'll probably just try to do a quick start without putting coolant in it just to make sure it turns over, but everything seems to be going to plan now that I got that on. What my big issue was is these Gates blue belts are known for being extremely rigid and a little bit tighter than other belts. So this one over here, this slipped right off, no problem at all. Like there was way more like extra like slack than this one, and I struggled really hard to get this one on because I had that tensioner backed all the way out to the point where that bolt was out, and I still couldn't get it on. And it just took an hour of just finessing to try to get that lined up with all these marks and slip that over. I got it most of the way on, like there was a little bit hanging off and I just couldn't get it, so I just made sure it wouldn't slip off, rotated the crank a couple times, and it started to just kind of gradually pull back. And if we look up top, it's sitting right where it should. This one's a little bit further out than I want it to be, so I'm going to go check the bottom and make sure that's running where it needs to be. One thing spins extremely free. It's pretty crazy. And dots line up there. Without wiggling it around, we'll get the cricket gauge again. Make sure it's reset. As I'm pulling this down, set it on the center. Usually you put your finger through like this to use it, but I'm just putting both of my fingers on top like this and pushing down. No different, I just can't really get my finger back in here. So what are we looking at? We're looking at about 90 right now, so I'll back it off about half a turn. Let's just give it a double check. Yeah, I think we're good. Alright, time to start buttoning things back up. Not a lot to do. I'll probably just try to fire it today just to make sure it spins, it starts up. We'll get some coolant in there tomorrow. We have the new timing belt on, so we don't have to worry about that. And then yesterday I did some work on the carbs. Got a balancing like airflow meter, and then here is the Stromberg like tuning tool. You pop these off, stick that down in there and spin it, and it has to have like the set pin right there so it doesn't damage the diaphragm. So I had to do a lot of waiting for that to ship over while the car just ran poorly. The carbs were not dialed in. They're not perfect now, but we have right there a wideband installed, so that made it a little bit easier to tune. But now I am on to the biggest problem, and that is a horrible, violent vibration low down in the rev range in gears 1 through 3. So, first thing I did was looking at the trans mounts. So you see that bolt hole right there? And then these two up here, there's like a 3-point mount that holds the trans up to this bar. But what also happens is, since these have inboard brakes, there is right here another mount where it mounts this cross member, and then this kind of just floats, and then up here these two bolts bolt onto the like kind of end cap of the transmission right there, and that houses the caliper. It's a very interesting design. That means the trans is mounted many different spots, and I think that might be part of my issue. But the other thing is on these drive shafts here, there's a U-joint there and a U-joint right there. So I think these are my culprit. You can see it a little bit better over here. I've luckily been able to source 4 of them through the AutoZone down the street. It's a fairly common U-joint. So what I have to do next is just pop these wheels off, undo the, I'm assuming, very, very tight like axle nut on the outside, unbolt these 4 bolts from the brake rotor right here, and then those should slide out. Press those guys in, and then up here with these trans mounts, I have all 6 of those bushings coming in today. And then up on the engine mount further up there, I already did the driver's side one. I have a passenger side one in that same package. So the car will have entirely new mounting system, and then all 4 U-joints replaced. And that should fix my vibration. At least I'm really hoping it does, because I don't know where else to look after that. All right, let's get to it. It looks fairly good, but there's a couple little cracks up in this area. I'm really hoping that's what's causing the issue, because I don't know what to do from there. We're going to throw 4 new greasable U-joints in here, get those clipped in, and that'll solve the drive shaft issue. Alright, things are coming around. I really struggled to get this axle nut off.
They're torqued to something like 200 foot-pounds or something like that, and I broke 2 breaker bars actually trying to get it off. So that was a struggle. And then also, I just replaced all my U-joints. You can see a lot of grease left over. I just greased them up. But I accidentally put one of them on the wrong direction. If you look here, you'll notice that this space is rather short. Right here, it's a little bit longer. I did one way, one the other way on accident. We want the smaller ones with the less weight out by the wheels for less unsprung weight. Up here we have engine mount, the other one I just put in, and then I just pressed all new bushings into my trans mounts here. They're all flush and even, unlike the previous ones. 4 new U-joints in, and then up here we have 6 new bushings for the trans mounts. Pretty crazy that there's like 6 bushings plus connected to the engine, and it's got mounts down on the cross member. And hey, guess what? It's still shaking. Alright, next thing to tackle are the engine mounts. These were already on my list. They're a notorious issue for the S1s. They tend to go bad every like 10,000 miles, or maybe more so just on the driver's side because it's right next to the exhaust. But if you see me wiggling this here, it's almost like there's a dome shape on either the mount or like this bracket, and it seems to have quite a bit of give. So I think I'm going to try to flatten that, sand both of them down, and get a really nice mating surface. It's also kind of weird because there's a bolt on either side of these mounts, and they're not really straight through. They're kind of offset, so I know that gives it a little bit more movement. Let's just keep throwing parts at it. Full new polyurethane motor mount kit. So understandably, I ended up rage quitting for a couple days. Don't usually do that, but I ended up taking the motor mounts off, reclocking them, and doing stuff like that a handful of times. I ended up fabricating 2 transmission braces too to hold it from shaking around. That wouldn't work either. So I ended up stepping back for a couple days, rethinking the situation, and I came across the thought of these. So you wouldn't really necessarily think that this would be causing such a violent vibration because these are just the lower links, but the actual rear end of the S1 Esprit doesn't have an upper one. It uses a spring and a lower link and then the drive shaft, and that's it. So what was happening was these bushings are looking pretty rough, but that's just because I was trying to get them out and ended up using a little bit of heat. But what is happening is these 2 pieces right here are supposed to be dead flat, and it sits pretty flush within like the receiver. And over time, these had started shaking enough that this edge actually pinched in and kind of actually eroded away some of the steel on all of them. So that was allowing excessive forward to back movement, and it was kind of oscillating, and I think that was just ramping up over time and just turning into a violent shake. So instead of just being able to replace the bushings, that would have been too easy. I had to buy the whole links, and shockingly, for a car that they made a couple hundred of, they were actually available, and like $75 for the 2 of them. So it's just kind of shocking how easy parts are to find for these cars. And that was actually probably the biggest issue I had with this car. Like, it was the biggest pain out of all of the things I was trying to fix to get sorted. So now that that is good, engine feels silky smooth, nothing else is a problem back there. The carburetors still need a little bit of adjustment, but it's not that bad. I think it's safe to say we have found what is wobbling the front wheels. So I'm going to put my wrench on the caliper bolt and just kind of pull it sideways. Look at that. I don't know how easy that is to see, but keep your eyes right here on that movement. Right there. Yeah, that's not supposed to happen. And I think the Series 1, these entire arms, this bushing is like
built into them, so I think I'll probably have to buy a new one of those, which is unfortunate, but I'm glad that means I don't have to come up and do these guys up here, because this bolt looks like a pain to take out. Look, the nut comes off of here, and then I believe you have to push this bolt into the interior of the car. Could be wrong, but that's the only thing I can think of there. But yeah, this is definitely not what you want to see out of any type of bushing. Yeah. I know they make a different style for the Series 2 where you can press that in. Thankfully these are available, and I think they're like $200 something for the pair of them, so that should be an easy fix. But while I'm in here, I'm going to take off the tie rod, we're going to fix this boot, and we're still going to redo these right here, because you can see there's some cracks right along this area here. So that, plus over here where it mounts, this bushing was all mangled too. Not sure how, because there's like no miles on the car since that's been done, but probably just from sitting. So I'm gonna take these off, order them up. It'll take a couple days to get in probably. Seeing how as I think the only people that have them are SJ, and we'll just kind of see what happens from there. But I'm 100% confident that that's my issue. All right, you got to take a look at this. So we're trying to get this bolt out of the lower arm right there. Could not figure out where to access it from. So I came through here, tore up the carpet, and there is that top bolt that I was saying I was concerned about trying to get to. That is, I believe, a chassis bolt, and then there is a plate right here that I believe I have to pry off to get to that bolt. Slightly interesting design, but I guess it could be worse.
So now that I have the lower controller mount, here's what we're faced with. The bushing is actually part of the controller itself, and I couldn't find one anywhere I looked. So what a couple people said online was just to drill this out, make sure it's perfectly circular, find a piece of steel that will accept the bushing with tolerances tight enough that it will actually stay in there when pushed with a press, and then we're just going to slide this in, weld it up around both edges to make it nice and secure, and then we're going to push in our new bushing, and that should pretty much solve that problem. However, I was unaware this wasn't the actual cause of the symptoms I was trying to fix. Like many other things on the car, I tried to go in and fix something, and it actually didn't end up being the fix for that specific problem. However, all these things needed to be fixed along the way, so I'm not mad. What this ended up actually being is while I was in here trying to replace the glass on my instrument cluster, I noticed that the steering column was very shaky. There's a bearing down by the end and a bearing up here by the steering wheel, and the top one was completely destroyed, like absolutely gone. So I ordered a new steering column, and it actually wasn't the exact one I was looking for. So I ended up just gutting it and using those parts to rebuild my own. And just like that, I had reached the end of my checklist to fix this car. So let's get it outside, take a look at everything, and get it on the road. Stepping back and looking at it, it's honestly hard to imagine how much work I actually put into this car. There were so many little things that actually needed done on this that weren't really worth filming, and that took up majority of the time. I just kind of showed you the main points and the exciting stuff. And many of you that were following along might have actually noticed this sold on Bring a Trailer recently. Now, I have a V8 Esprit, and I thought I was going to sell that to be keeping this S1, but as time goes on, I'm realizing that might be my forever car. I just love that thing so much, and there's no way I'm ever getting rid of it. So I just ended up making a super thorough ad for Bring a Trailer, and everybody must have just appreciated the ad and the amount of work that was done to the car, because the last couple minutes it got down to a crazy bidding war and went up $33,000 in the last 2 minutes. I was genuinely floored at this. And just like any other irresponsible car guy, I went out and immediately bought another car with my profits. So this R8 was actually in pretty terrible condition as well, so I actually have a couple videos on getting that thing going if you're interested. And before I knew it, this thing was off to its new owner. One can really appreciate how insane it looks just driving down the road next to normal cars. It's hard to believe my story with this car has come to the end, but it's going to a very nice home, and I have a lot more cars on my plate and more videos to make about those too. So make sure to like and subscribe if you made it this far, and thank you for following along.